All right, welcome to another episode of Full Court Passport. I'm Ric Bucher. That is Boston Boki Nachbar. Our special guest today is Mike Creppy. I'll tell you all about him in just a second, but I have to let you know that Full Court Passport is sponsored by the New Air Club, a door-to-door private jet service that will take care of your every need at an unbeatable price. What sets New Air apart is that it does more than arrange your private jet and crew. They will handle ground transportation, hotel, catering requests, security, you name it. And because they bundle their service, you can be sure the trip will cost exponentially less. Not everyone can afford private jet travel, we understand that. But for those who can, make sure that you're getting as much luxury for every dollar as you deserve. Check out their website at newairclub.com to see exactly how luxurious travel can be. All right, so need to introduce Mike, the chief executive of the international consulting firm Vindicated Sports. He's a former overseas player for at least a decade, if I'm not mistaken, but his real claim to fame and flame at this point is creator of the documentary Imported, which follows several men and women players on their odysseys playing overseas, and it can be found on Hulu and Disney+. So with all that, welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Boki, for having me.
So I want to start here. Why did you adopt the moniker Vindicated for the agency and your Instagram handle, Vindicated Mike? What is it about that word?
Well, I'm a word guy, right? My second year when I was playing in Denmark. This is pre the explosion of social media, so I think Instagram was just starting, and I had a Droid at the time, so I wasn't even active when it was. So I had a lot of time on my hands. I just started studying the dictionary and words, and my mother's an English professor and public speaking teacher, so words mean a lot to me. So everything has a meaning. So vindicated, is to prove yourself right, right? And that was my whole journey through basketball. I was constantly trying to show people that I am who I am. And that's always been stuck with me. That's been something that's been indicative of my entire basketball journey is, it's never been about proving other people wrong. It's always been about proving myself right. Sometimes it was a lot of delusion at first. And then obviously my skills caught up with the confidence and the delusion. But yeah, so vindicated is just proving yourself right. And that's what we've adopted.
What inspired you to make Imported?
Yeah. So, I was listening to a lot of, linear sports television and, some pretty popular podcasts and basketball podcasts. And the conversation of overseas basketball started to become much more prevalent than ever before. It started to become a part of the mainstream conversation. Before you guys know that, if you were in the deep roots of basketball and in certain circles, you would hear about guys going to play overseas, at least for an American, right? It was much more prevalent in European countries. But in America is NBA, 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 as Rick, as you know. And so we are starting to see guys in the prime of their careers go to Europe, go to Asia, Australia, in droves that we've never seen before. Before, Dominique will go at the end of his career, or Byron Scott, and even Magic Johnson went overseas, believe it or not. And all those guys in between, but they were going in the twilights of their career. Guys now are going after their maybe first NBA contract and not getting a second one and going. So just seeing all that, me using my background as somebody that was very educated and I didn't have to play basketball. I've always looked at basketball in macro terms anyway. So I'm always thinking, how can I help the game and thinking of ways to help the game outside of myself. Yeah. And I started seeing that and I'm like, well, somebody's going to start telling these stories. Why not me? Right. And so, that's how Imported got started. That was the genesis of everything, was just listening to, NBA players talking about it. And of course, Kobe was a big champion of, the conversation about development from grassroots. And that's still a big conversation now. You listen to Gil's Arena and other podcasts. That's a huge point of contention for a lot of these basketball debates is, are we developing basketball the right way in America as opposed to, in Europe, which is the standard for most basketball enthusiasts. And even Kevin Merida has chimed in on it recently. But that's how we started Imported, was just listening to that conversation.
And what is your take on that when it comes to development in the U.S. now versus the way players are developed overseas?
Well, I'm always an advocate for skill and development, right? Exposure will come at its right time, but there's no exposure. What's the point of having exposure if you can't perform? So when kids are from, I will say from 7, if not earlier than that, now in America, if you're like 3 or 4, you're starting with basic skills, dribbling, passing, footwork, and things like that. So, from that age all the way up to maybe ninth or 10th grade age, it should be all about development. Nobody cares how many games you win in junior EYBL and all of these made hoops tournaments. Like nobody cares how many games you win. So I see kids that are scoring at a high level, but the way they're playing won't translate to high level high school, college, and certainly not the pros. And so that's something that I'm very passionate about is, employing to parents and coaches, please make sure you're not sacrificing development for this initial success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, I want to go quickly just one step back before I ask you another question is regarding the documentary. In the States, it can be seen on Hulu, correct?
Hulu and Disney Plus internationally as well.
What I wanted to ask is how many players are working with you through Vindicated?
Wow. So we have events. So we have a lot of players that come through our network, obviously a lot of messages that we get. Now I'm very strategic about who I help just because, I don't ever want to be like, I'm not an agent. I'm not a certified agent at all. I just give advice and I connect people with agents in our network that are FIBA and NBA certified. But what I do is I help them navigate that to let them know just because an agent is interested in you, that might not be the right agency for you. My first agency was 3i Sports with Bill McCandless, very good agency, reputable, but I wasn't right for them at the time. It's not to discredit them as an agency. Like I said, they're a great agency. But where I was in my career, I wasn't the right fit. So we have a lot of players that come through our network, but the players we've actually gotten signed to FIBA certified leagues that we consider reputable leagues, there's 60 players today.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what did you learn through the making of the documentary Vindicated?
On the production side, or just because I learned a lot. This is my first attempt at film. So I never attempted to film a day in my life.
So take us back to that first, okay, you know what? I'm going to make a documentary. Like what was that? What was your first move? What was your first move and what was your first mistake?
Well, I can speak to both pretty candidly. So the first move was, like I said, I was doing all of these events taking place in these different countries, starting in COVID. So we had a lot of attention during that time. And that was the first time that I really valued videography and content. Before I would just do stuff off my cell phone. And, I don't come from the era where we record everything. So that was an adjustment I had to make. So starting from there, I hired a videographer and we just started editing it in a way that the players of today and the kids of today will be receptive towards. And one of my family friends, Kevin Merida, who at the time was an executive at ESPN, Kevin was a big time journalist for the Washington Post, ended up becoming the editor in chief at the LA Times. At the time when he was at ESPN, he also created ESPN The Undefeated. And so he saw what I was doing and he told me, he said, "Hey, Mike, you might have the basis for a documentary." So of course, I just started asking the requisite questions, how do I get started? I didn't know what a pitch deck was. I didn't know what a sizzle reel was. Like these are obviously the beyond basics of how you start to do a project.
That's the ABCs.
Yeah, ABCs. I knew nothing of it. So he did a great job of connecting me with the right people. And they, over the course of time, their questions told me what I needed to do. So they would ask me, how much content do I have in the can? Have you started filming already? All of these different things. And obviously I had none of that. So I was watching Netflix one day and it was a story on Ronnie Coleman, this bodybuilder who's now crippled. And one of the people interviewed was somebody that I trained with back in Maryland because I'm from the Washington, D.C. area. And I went back home in October of 2023 for my mother's birthday and he was in the gym, Kevin Levrone. He's a big time bodybuilder in that world. And I said, "Hey, can you put me in touch with the producers of your documentary that you were on?" So he put me in touch with them. And then we just started filming. We started filming all through Europe. We filmed in Istanbul. I went to every location. So we were in Istanbul, Slovakia, obviously LA, New York, Orlando, Maryland. We filmed Edgar in Iraq, but because of the State Department, we couldn't actually go over there. I was down to go, put on one of those orange vests and let's go. Let's film this. But my people advised against that, and so we hired a crew out of Dubai to go and film Edgar. So that was the only location I wasn't physically at. But yeah, that's how it got started. And then from there, you just learned along the way. We switched production companies along the way, and we hired a crews out of here, Marginal Media. They've done a lot of work in the documentary space, and they do a lot of work with Hulu and Anscape, which was ESPN The Undefeated. It's been rebranded to Anscape. So, and then they brought Jay Williams and Giannis to the table with Improbable Media. This was months before they actually announced the media company. So, Sanjay Sharma, who's the head of Marginal Media, sent me a text that I'll never forget. He said, "Hey, Mike, don't get too excited, but Giannis might be interested in putting his name attached to it." So, once you get a big name like that, somebody who transcends his industry, now it's like, now we're thinking, okay, this might be something. Because before, I didn't, I had it in my mind, I was going to film it and edit it and ask these questions and interview in a way that's quality. But you just don't know, and and my ignorance was my superpower in this space. Because had I known what I know now, because I put up all the initial money. So
wow.
I probably wouldn't have done it, because to know how many factors had to go through for this to actually get to a Hulu or get approved by a Disney company. There's so much red tape. But that was my ignorance. I just kept going. And, the people that were in the industry were telling me, "Hey, Mike, like, this is happening, that's happening." I was just like, "Hey, look, we're this far. The fact they even know my name is a blessing. So, why are we going to stop now? Let's just keep going. They should know who I am based on my experience or lack thereof." And so that's how we got started.
What was the major idea or the emphasis on what aspect of players' career did you want to show? Because there's so much that goes into the life of an athlete that goes from the States to Europe or vice versa. What did you want to focus on?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked me that, because I was very intentional about everything. So I didn't want to obviously players going from America to overseas is already fascinating, but I wanted to take it a step further, because if I'm trying to get this on a major platform, what is going to make the common person that doesn't care about basketball or sports want to watch this? And so what I settled on was, who can we get that got as close to the NBA as they possibly could, but didn't make it? So that was the criteria that we were looking for the players that we featured. So obviously James Guist, he's my best friend. Like, I'm his son's godfather. We grew up together. He got drafted. Yes.
I know James. Great guy.
EuroLeague legend, right? He got drafted by the Spurs, and this was at the height of the Spurs' reign in 2008. So they had a lot of players at that power forward position, starting with Tim Duncan, all the way to Matt Bonner, Dewan Blair, like you name it. And so, he never played an NBA game. Never once played one NBA game. Played in preseason, played summer league, got as close as you possibly can get, but never played. Then we had Lindsay Pulliam, another person I've known since she was 10 years old. She's been a pro well before high school based on her approach to basketball. 2,000-point scorer in the Big Ten at Northwestern. Got drafted by the Atlanta Dream. The women's game is a different set of issues, because they don't have enough spots, even for a top 25 pick like she was. So she, to date, has never played a WNBA game. And then we got Edgar Sosa. So the story with Edgar is actually probably the most fascinating one, because Lindsay and James, I knew I could get them because I've known them their whole lives. Edgar, I knew of him, but I never met him. So I was on vacation in Cairo, Egypt. I was there for Thanksgiving. And, like I do, because with Vindicated, I have a lot of people around the world in my WhatsApp network. So I like to, see whoever I'm close by, see if we can sit down, have a coffee, and do a face-to-face. And so
Why don't you explain that? Because I don't know that everybody just says, "Hey, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Cairo for Thanksgiving." I'm glad you gave us a little bit of the backstory there, because that was going to be my question.
Yeah, I mean, Cairo is just an amazing, place. Egypt, I just was like, hey, let me go. And so, he was playing for Zamalek, which is a very big team, not only with basketball, but soccer or football as well, in that region. And so they won the BAL, I think 2 or 3 years in a row. So they were a pretty prominent team at the impetus of the BAL League, Basketball Africa League. So, I called the GM, and we agreed to come to the game. I didn't know how far it was. So he said, "Hey, you 15 minutes, come to the game." And so we get there, he sits me up there with the owner, I'm meeting everybody, and he says, "Do you know Edgar?" I said, I know of him. Edgar is Gaucho's legend, Bronx legend, Louisville star, all Big East. And he said, well, come down and meet him. So I'm looking around and I'm like, man, like he would be perfect for this documentary. And at the time, it was just an idea. At the time, I didn't have anything written down, but I'm just trying to put the pieces together in my mind. And I said, hey, look, you don't know me, but I have this idea for this movie and I think you'll be perfect. So we took a picture and I posted it to my Instagram and so many people commented. They said, man, I forgot about him. Like, what is he doing out there? So I said, okay, cool. So once I got the production side ready and we were ready to start filming a year later, I messaged him and I said, hey, remember that movie or the documentary I was telling you about? And he said, yeah. I said, it's ready to go. I said, where are you playing? And he said, Baghdad, Iraq. And I said, perfect. Like now we can pull in the political side. We can pull in so much more to talk about it. And that's going to get a Disney, a Netflix, Amazon Prime to, sit up in their chair. Or what we say that I've learned in Hollywood is called the eyebrow test, right? Mm-hmm. Once you get people to raise their eyebrows, it's like, okay, now you have something.
Yep.
And so that's, some of the nonverbal cues that I pick up on. But so that's how we chose the players. And Edgar, to put a button on it, he was all Big East at Louisville, had about 18 or 19 workouts, never played in the NBA. First team all Big East.
Do you know
why
he didn't? Because just looking at the way he plays now, watching Imported, he's kind of built for the NBA. I mean, it's not.
Well, like Boki said before we came online, it's a situation thing. It's a numbers thing. It's so many factors to becoming an NBA player that unfortunately has nothing to do with your skill set.
Yeah.
Because, we see players in Europe and Asia and Australia that could easily play in the NBA. And
Yeah. I wonder how much of that is, and it's different now because teams are really keeping tabs on everything going on globally. Mm-hmm. But that, I think that's the attraction for some guys to stay in the G League is there's more of a chance that someone's going to see you and grab you rather than we got to go get this guy from Baghdad or Cairo or wherever. And the scouting is maybe not to the level, or there's a question of the level of competition.
I think Ric is not. I think you'll be visible anywhere nowadays. I think it's more of a proximity thing. I think if you're in a G League, you can get easier out of the contract and get a a short-term contract or an opportunity with an NBA team. Whereas if you're in Europe or other parts of the world, you're most likely going to have a full season's contract, which means that if you want to leave in the middle of the season, where competitive teams are not even going to let you get out of the contract, but if that's the case, you're going to probably have to leave some money on the table, negotiate a buyout. So it becomes a very difficult thing. I don't think it's so much about visibility. I think NBA teams know very well who's playing where and how they're playing.
And they're seeing what they're doing.
Yeah. So like to piggyback on what Boki said, like Pat Beverly, he's famously said before he got his opportunity in the NBA, he had to buy out of his contract. I think he was in Russia at the time.
He was in
Greece,
I think.
Russia, and he had to pay his buyout out of his own pocket.
Yeah,
and he bet on himself, and obviously he had a pretty long career in the NBA. But it's similar, like to one of the players we interviewed. So it didn't just stop at the players we featured. The players we interviewed were very strategic as well. Obviously there were some players that we didn't get that I was trying to, but the players we got Chris Wright, who's somebody from the DC area that I've known for a long time. First player to ever play in the NBA with multiple sclerosis. And, he went overseas first, and then came back to the NBA. And, to answer your question too, Ric, like, you thinking these guys, when they were coming out of school, since 2008 to 2010, social media wasn't what it is now. And it wasn't a lot of self-promotion and branding like we have now. So it was just a different time. Like even for James, we talk about this all the time. Had we known second round picks weren't guaranteed contracts, he might have pushed like Ric, which Paul does with a lot of his clients. Hey, don't draft him because he had promises from Golden State and Toronto that wanted him. But the Spurs had him. Now they have his rights, and now he's overseas. And they're infamous for sending and stashing players overseas because they have a lot of connections with their European pipeline. And so, like, he kind of got caught up in that. Like, he was easily an NBA player just off his athleticism alone, let alone of his skill and his IQ, which he got to show that in the EuroLeague. But like there's so many things that we learned along the way that we didn't know just because it wasn't a lot of information.
Mm.
Whether it's your playing experience or working with a client, there's always stories about some of the wild experiences guys have playing, venues, fans, crowds. What's the craziest situation you ever found yourself in?
Oh, probably when I was playing in Greece.
Yeah.
So that was the highest level I played in Europe, and my team was A1 at the time. I think they've changed the name of the top league now, but I was playing with the Lysiakos, that was in Athens, and really next to Zagrafu, which is a popular part of the city near the city center and the parliament. And so at the time, they were going through an economic depression at the time. And there was a lot of protests going on. And a lot of the smaller club teams outside of Panathinaikos and Olympiacos, they were kind of hit by that because the teams are run by sponsorships, financed by sponsorships, right? So my teammates went on strike. My Greek teammates went on strike, meaning the Americans, it was five of us. I consider myself an American, even though I was a Bosman. I don't know if you guys have talked about that difference on the pod before, but essentially,
We
I
have
was an
not.
American. Yeah, I was an American playing under an EU passport. I had a British passport. This was pre-Brexit, and so it's 2012.
Okay.
And so it was four Americans, myself, and we're there. We're going to practice, and my teammates are just stay. They stayed in the locker room. And, they're like, look, we're not practicing. This was literally the week before the Panathinaikos game. So
Mm.
for those who don't know, Panathinaikos is one of the biggest clubs in Europe. They're a historic club. They usually have some of the best players in the world. Most of them have touched the NBA at some point. And so this was that week that we're supposed to be preparing for this game. And they decided to go on strike. And, they would be, I don't know if they were being dramatic or not, but they were saying they hadn't been paid since August. They couldn't afford a coffee. And, that was probably one of the wildest things that I ever saw because, they just did not practice. And they just stayed in
Yeah.
the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I experienced. And obviously, you go to the games and, you see the crowds and, they're lighting flares. And obviously in the movie, we talk about Kyle Hines, who, we would be remiss not to talk about him. He's probably the most decorated American that has ever played overseas. You guys can Google and look up his resume.
Oh,
But
he's been on the podcast.
okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, so Kyle is one of the guys we interviewed, and he talked about it. And there's actually footage of it when he was playing a game when he was at Olympiacos, and he was playing at Panathinaikos. How somebody shot a flare
Yeah, I remember
out
that.
of and it hit him in the head
Yeah.
while he's warming up, and
Yeah.
that's stuff that you will never see in the States.
No.
I think he told us that story. His
Yeah.
jersey was like on fire.
Yeah,
And one of
this
his
footage is
teammates
great.
came
It's
over
grainy footage, but you can find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen
Yeah.
it. I've
Wow.
seen it. It's crazy. I mean, but on one hand, let's say I wouldn't call them negatives, but these crazy stories that people have from international game. But what are some of the maybe the most rewarding things or experiences that you had, whether yours or whether a client of yours that experienced?
Yeah, no, thank you for, obviously shedding light on the positive side of playing internationally because I think we're so enamored with some of the more provocative things that it can kind of distract us from some of the benefits of playing overseas, right? Obviously, as an American going to another country, you get to experience new cultures. You have global friends. And, for me, from a business standpoint, I have a global network now. Like that's, one thing that really helped me with Vindicated was I was able to leverage my global network with these different entities, specifically with this Japanese shoe brand that I do business with. But you meet people from all over the world. You get to see there's a lot more commonalities and differences in the world. One of my favorite stories about one of the players that I've helped is Damian Rosser. So Damian's playing Champions League right now with in Israel, and he started at one of my events, right? And he came to my Japan showcase, paid to come to the showcase. And, from there, obviously, he was somebody that had a modicum of success at the University of New Orleans. So he wasn't somebody that should have been at one of my events. I affectionately say, if you come to one of my events, there's a reason you're coming there because we target the players that nobody else wants to work with because I look beyond your profile when I'm evaluating and vetting. I look at your game, your style of play, and I know obviously the countries and, what teams are looking for. So just because you average 2 points and I'm watching you play, there has to be a story there. And I give the players that type of grace. While, some agents and teams, they don't have the time to kind of do a deep dive on a player. They see where they played, they see their stats, and they're, okay, we'll put you over here. Right. And, that's why, I want to start Vindicated to give guys like Damian Rosser, who had the ability to play, to maximize what they can do. And so obviously we saw him play, came to the showcase, and immediately in the hotel, we're in Japan. I'm contacting my network. I'm like, there's this guy here. Like, he should not be here. He needs to be playing somewhere. So we actually get him a pretty decent deal in Oman in the Middle East, which we don't recommend for your first job to go to the Middle East, just because, Europe and some of the more stronger respected leagues, they don't think too highly of the Middle East or Asia, but the money was too good to pass up for his first year. Then from there, he goes to, where'd he go? He was in Eastern Europe, not Switzerland, Hungary. I think it was Hungary. And he plays well there. And then from there, we get him signed to Octagon Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And then now he's playing Champions League in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So from like 4 years, he goes from obscurity to playing in, playing your international competition.
Mm-hmm.
So he's one of my greatest success stories. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Before we let you go, I have to ask, just because it just kicked off, and Boki and I are going to talk a little more at length about some of the things that are happening with EuroLeague as a result of the political unrest and everything that's going on in the Middle East now. How is that impacting you and your clients?
Well, obviously, like we just said, Damian, he's in Israel, and obviously, like Edgar is in Iran. He's playing in Iran right now. So he just put out a post yesterday, thankfully letting people know that he's safe and that he's okay. But he's literally in the middle of it. In that country right now. So that hits pretty home for me, just because, of the relationship that we now have. But, that's just more on a personal level. Business wise, Bogi, this is just part of when you play in that region. That's why they, for years, paid so much, was because of the risk that you have, not only just from a, safety standpoint, but, you're almost relegated to your hotel or your apartment after practice or your games. Mm-hmm. So, it's a lot of isolation in that part of the world.
Is that because you're American, or is it because of just the what's going on in the streets?
They just, they're erring on the side of caution. I've never played in that part of the world, so I'm going off of what I've heard. And it's just erring on the side of caution. Like, hey, we want to make sure that while you're here, you're safe. So we'll give you a driver, which isn't, customary if you play in Europe or Asia. They'll give you a car, but in the Middle East, they're known for giving drivers to make sure you go from point A to point B safely. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you have your teammates who are local from that part of the world most of the time. They can show you the lay of the land. But yes, it's more of a safety thing to make sure you get home safe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, hey, listen, this was terrific, really insightful, and congratulations again on the success of Imported. I can't wait to see what's coming next as far as what you are developing. And as we were talking before the show, we the three of us have a lot of connection points where I think that we can probably help each other. So we will continue to be in touch. But in the meantime, continued success.
Yeah, be on the lookout. We will be screening the film at the NBA Summer League Film Festival this July. So we'll be there for that. They have a film festival now. This is the third year.
That's in Vegas, right?
It's in Vegas. Yeah. So we will be screening the movie there. We'll be having a panel there as well. So if you're there, we'll be doing promotion as well to remind everybody. But please come say hi, check out the movie, let us know what you think.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
I might be there, so I might see you there.
No, we'll have lunch for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sounds good. All right, Mike. Thank you very much.
All right, Rick. Thanks, Boki. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. That was Mike Creppy with Vindicated Sports, former overseas. Lot to get into there. You know what? It's not hard to see, Boki, why he's been successful. Like, he used the word vindicated. I think persistent. It might be.
And you can sense the passion behind it. He's lived it, and he understands how much is there to uncover when it comes to international basketball and American players playing overseas. And there really is a lot. And I think in many ways, some of these stories can be even more interesting than the high success stories. You know what I mean? Because you can see the layers that these people, yes, players go through, the sacrifice, the you fall down, you get back up, and these stories at the end of the day are extremely important, and they can be they can be also very emotional in many ways. I've seen those players who have done everything to succeed on an international level.
Yeah. Well, and it's the human element, because it's not just basketball. Like there's so many other things
for sure
that go into success and present the challenges that exist. And to that point, what we had happen over the weekend, where we now have conflict in the Middle East, and we have three teams, Hapoel and Maccabi, and I guess Dubai as well. I don't know what's happening with Dubai, but my understanding is that Maccabi is moving to Belgrade, and Hapoel is moving to Bulgaria.
Sofia. Yeah, I mean it's a little bit up in the air currently, at least now that we're recording this over the weekend here on March 1st. I mean, and there's more teams there. Like, I don't want it, for people who don't know, to sound that there's only 3 teams in the region. Like, you have a lot of other teams who are playing international basketball in Israel with foreign players also, not just Maccabi and Hapoel, obviously, right? So the whole Israeli league is full of foreign players as well. And I was actually there. I was actually in Tel Aviv from Wednesday to Friday.
Really?
I didn't mention to you. I went there. I had a couple of meetings. There was a game, Hapoel Milano team traveled there. I wanted to make sure that I'm there as well, because it was kind of a build up towards this kind of what's going to happen. And I wanted the players to see that me and my coworker, we're there kind of supporting the whole situation in sense of team traveling there. And I got home Friday afternoon, and then Saturday, the whole thing started.
Like crazy. Wow.
And so I was one of the lucky ones to get out. But it is true, there's teams there now, so they're trying to get out. Most of the Maccabi players are out already, out of Israel, because they had international FIBA play, so they left early. Teams, the Hapoel team is relocating to Sofia, most likely, or Belgrade. And Dubai team obviously is in a situation there where they have players home, and some additional players who went and for a couple of days for a vacation to Dubai, because it's such a, let's say, interesting location to go for a couple of days for Europeans, and they got stuck there in Dubai. So it's and we're keeping in touch with player representatives from those teams and kind of staying on top of it. But it's very difficult because you have this situation where basically there's no flights allowed. There's a no-flight zone over the region currently. So to get not just players, but anybody out of that country right now, it's almost impossible. So best thing is to stay put and wait, and hopefully in a day or two, things is going to improve to a point where there's going to be flights taken off, so people can start leaving. And
so in a situation like that, are you transporting like entire families out of there with the players? How extensive is the work when you've got to move? It sounds crazy. You got to move a franchise.
I mean, that's we should really talk to some of the tech managers or operations people from these clubs, because it's not an easy feat to do that. But both Israeli teams played in abroad already over the last, not just this season, but Maccabi or other teams also in past seasons. So it's not the first time they're doing that, but right. It's not easy. I mean, imagine not just players and their families, but also all the equipment and all the other staff you got to basically relocate in order to function in a different country. It's I imagine it's a huge undertaking. So best of luck, and to all those people and all these players who are trying to get out, and hopefully we'll have more positive news tomorrow, Monday, or the latest Tuesday.
Yeah. So when it comes to like the kids in school, a place to live, like transportation, like all of that. I mean, I'm just thinking of it from a personal standpoint. Look, when the Sacramento Kings, when it was just a rumor that they might be moving to Seattle, it threw that team off. It threw the players off. Mm-hmm. When the Seattle Supersonics moved to Oklahoma City, and it kind of happened right before the season, and guys were scrambling to get situated with their families and whatnot, that first season was they struggled, and it was largely because they were trying to acclimate to a different place and play at a high level at the same time. And so we're seeing this, and I would imagine you would know better, but I would imagine that like playing overseas, you become kind of conditioned to these circumstances. Not that it makes it easier, but I mean, you know that possibility exists a little bit more, or you've seen people go through it, that there are maybe resources.
I think it depends where you sign. I think if you sign in Western Europe, you don't expect those things, right? I mean, even in general in Europe, I would say. But Israel, I think players who have signed for those teams, they knew that is a possibility they will have to relocate at some point, right? I mean, they started the season abroad and played abroad basically up until end of November, early December. So,
right.
And then they returned back to Israel, and now most definitely the games are going to be relocated abroad again. So you that was a part of the deal, so to say, like you knew that's a possibility. And sure, and I'll give you my firsthand experience. Like I was there until Friday, and you have no sense of anything wrong going on when you were in Tel Aviv. Like I was told by many players from both teams continuously throughout the season, life here is normal. Life here is normal. Like I went there, I was at the hotel, I walked down the street, I went to a restaurant. Like I was able to do everything that a normal person can. And if you wouldn't think that there's anything going on in the next 24 hours, you would think life is as normal as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's normal until it's not, and things change quickly. And yeah, it's not easy. I can't imagine, even though I talk to players and try to give them as much support as possible, I don't imagine how it has to feel when basically you have to relocate, not just for yourself and your basketball career, but also your families. That's not easy.
Yeah. How do you think in the big picture this is going to affect the EuroLeague season?
I think it's been affected in a big way already. And it's a lot of debate currently around it, mostly, and I'm not going to get into politics. I never want to do that. It's mostly from the competition standpoint. Teams who played Israeli teams early in the season played them in neutral sites in Belgrade, in Sofia, with minimal fan support. Then some other teams had to play them in their home court back in Tel Aviv. And of course, on one hand, you want to offer, and I'm looking strictly from the player standpoint. I'm not looking at politics. I'm not looking at the club's politics and none of that. I'm looking from the player's perspective. Yeah, we want players to play at home and to have the opportunity to play in front of their fans. So the opportunity was there. The clubs have decided to return the games back to Israel in late November, early December. We even had players from other teams telling us they want those teams to return because they didn't want to play in front of almost empty arenas in Belgrade and Sofia. Everybody wants to play in front of full arenas. So that has happened. Now we're going to go back to playing in front of almost empty arenas in Sofia and Belgrade, and some teams are going to visit those teams there.
Yeah.
So it kind of throws off the fairness of the competition in a way, right? Like you play against Maccabi in front of fans or without no fans, it's just not the same. So that's the big debate. But you know what? It is what it is, because the important thing is that you navigate as a league as much as possible around these things and try to keep the whole competition alive. And so far, the league has managed to do that. And we'll see how it evolves between now and between end of April when the playoffs end, and then we only have Final Four left in Athens, and that's it.
Yeah. By the way, moving to Belgrade is very understandable. What is it about Sofia, Bulgaria, that makes that a good site to base a EuroLeague team?
It's been an odd, let's say, for at least for us who are not in the circle of the clubs deciding where to go and why. I thought it was odd because Sofia is not known as a basketball hub. Belgrade is. But, again, from the players' perspective, from what I heard, players were happy that they were there. The city was good. The arena was good. They got the apartments there where they stayed at. So they felt pretty good there when the season started. And I assume they'll be back in the same setup now. But I think you just have to be as innovative as possible and try to find locations where you can play. And kudos to teams for being able to organize that and keeping the season alive.
My guess would be that there's some sort of business connection or some
Could be,
sort of connection between
could be.
ownership with the club and that city.
Could
That,
be,
that
but you have to know that it's not easy because EuroLeague has its standards when it comes to arenas, and not every arena fits that, and not every arena has dates available around Europe, right? So you can't just say, "Hey, where do I want to go? Let me go to,
maybe that's part of it too.
let me go there, or let me go to
Yeah,
that country. Let me go." No, you can't, because you have to find the arena that actually has
yeah,
dates available for the games, which are played usually during, not usually, yearly games are played during the week. So
yeah.
that's another one.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
One last item I just want to touch on. We'll talk more about it in no doubt in upcoming episodes. But Monaco, a big win, maybe unexpected considering all of the kind of the everything going on behind the scenes. But at this point, how much does the victory, winning the league, winning the domestic league, um, and what has to happen? How much of an influence does that have on where things go in coming months, and what has to happen for the franchise, for the club to continue?
I mean, first of all, I have nothing but praise for players who, got together and played the French Cup and won the French Cup, which is not an easy thing to do. I'm talking about players of Monaco. It's a very difficult situation, obviously. Financial crisis of the club. Not going to get into a lot of details. Some was already said in the media, but it's not really important why, or why it happened and how it happened. But um, the situation is that the club is obviously trying to find ways to get through this crisis and to continue to function, maybe with a new leadership, new ownership in the future. And that's something that we'll have to wait and see how it evolves, if the club is going to be able to survive this issue, or this big problem. Because otherwise, I could see other teams, other clubs trying to take their spot. And I don't want to speculate here what's going to happen, because nobody really knows.
Yeah,
I will say this: that Monaco has been, basketball-wise speaking, a force during the last few seasons. I mean, they've made, I think, 3 out of 4, if I'm not mistaken, Final Fours. Always put together an extremely competitive teams, high-level players. They had, without a doubt, and still have, the same goal this season, especially with the roster they have. But I will also say this: on this show, we spoke a lot about the negatives of European basketball and EuroLeague in particular, and how, an entity like an NBA, with all their commercial know-how, how important would it be to have a reset almost at this point of European basketball. And that's one proof of it. Like in the past, we've basically lost clubs because whatever it was, mismanagement or financial crisis that happened for whatever reasons, the instability. I've been a part of the club in Moscow that basically went under in 2008, 2009 season. So we want to avoid that, and we need to have a reset and rethinking of the sporting model, of the competition model, of the commercial distribution model. Like, that has to change. It has to improve. It's a huge shame to have a team, for example, like Monaco, is highly competitive, that hits these problems and basically is on the brink of not surviving.
yeah,
The basketball in Europe is too good to allow that, and that's why I always say that we need a reset, and we need to put together strengths together with NBA and to improve that, because
yeah,
the product on court, as you, Rick, know, it's absolutely amazing. I keep saying that, and I'm going to keep repeating that.
yeah. No doubt. I feel like as if the EuroLeague is a conglomerate of separate entities. And until you get a sense of a collaborative effort that, the tide rises all boats. Like, we
Yeah,
need to work together. We can compete against each other, but from a business standpoint, we need to work together, and we have to create a safety net for the teams that are not having a good year, or when things go a little sideways, that it
for
doesn't
sure,
mean that their future and their existence is in jeopardy. Like,
for sure.
we need to protect each other,
And
right? And
that's been the issue. That's been the issue, Rick, because it's been too much on each club or even each country in a way in Europe.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of collaboration. And I think you used a great word, or two words that I like safety net. Like, when, ideally speaking, in a strong league like EuroLeague, when a club faces this kind of issues, there should be a system in place that helps the club to get through that. So make sure that this entity or this environment or this fan base survives, right? And then people will say, yeah, well, Monaco is very specific. It's a separate country, small country, small gym. They never really developed or built a new arena, even though there was a lot of talk about it. But tomorrow it could be a different team because we've seen it. We've seen it, whether it was Russian teams, whether it was Turkish teams struggling in the past, whether it was Italian teams in the past that went under. And now we have Monaco that is on the brink of it. Like this needs to change going forward. I think it's 2026 and looking ahead, there's ways to improve European basketball from the business standpoint. And the time to do that is now.
Agreed. All right. That does it for this episode. I want to thank Mike Creppy again for joining us. And Boki, as always, please stay safe. Hopefully your travels don't.
I'm staying put for a while now.
Who knows? Who knows what's going to jump off when?
Yeah, I'm staying put for a while, but thanks. I appreciate that.
All right. And we will do it again. We'll do it again next week.
All right. Take care.